Episode 1 of this series opened with a Microsoft Teams call at the start of my holiday. It was a Monday afternoon, I remember it vividly, and just 4 minutes in, 20-something years of corporate life for me was done and over. I remember sitting there in the silence after I had the call thinking, what the heck am I gonna do now? 8 episodes later, I want to answer that question. Not the practical version, because we've covered all of that. The practical steps are in the entire 8 episodes and in the bonus episodes, and I'm in the middle of creating those, and we'll obviously leave links in the description once they're finished, plus the resources that I've used as well, which again, I'll leave links in the description, as well as frameworks which are peppered entirely across this whole series. I want to answer the deeper version of that question in this video, the one underneath the redundancy, the rebuild beneath the income stack and the LinkedIn strategy and the anchor skill and the 3-word identity. It's more, what is the thing that you're building actually for? Who's it going to impact? This final episode is my attempt to answer that and to give you something to build your own answer from. As usual, I hope you've got a cup of something good with you. Well, again, you know how it finishes. Eight episodes, 8 topics, but what if you were to ask me, Norf, what's the one word that you would boil this entire series down to? What would that word be? I'd probably have to sit for a minute and think about it, but I would say this series was really about one thing, and that one thing is permission. If you were to rewind back to episode 1 was permission to grieve the old chapter without pretending that you're fine. Episode 2 was permission to own what you're actually worth, outside of the job description that's used to define and contain it. Episode 3 was permission to be afraid, scared, but to move forwards anyway. Episode 4 was permission to talk honestly and candidly about money, the thing that most reinvention content treats as an embarrassing afterthought. Episode 5 was permission to use the network that you've spent decades building, rather than cold pitching to strangers and wondering why nothing lands. Episode 6 was permission and courage to reinvent in the place that you already are, not potentially jet-setting off to somewhere exotic where nobody knows you, but rather right here in the familiar, in full view of what's going on. Episode 7 was permission to be mid-climb, to be in the messy middle without pretending that you've already arrived at that euphoric end. And this episode, the last one in this series, is permission to build something that actually matters, that leaves a positive mark and lasts. Not a job that gets made redundant, and not a title that disappears when a restructure hits, but something that belongs to you, completely, permanently, and on your own terms. This is what the 51st chapter has always been about. Not survival, but more ownership. I want to share a cross-generational message, but before I do that, I want to ask you something that most business content never really asks, or certainly the content that I've watched and I've not seen. Because I reckon it's more difficult to answer than typically using a spreadsheet with a bunch of formulas, and it doesn't necessarily lend itself to a framework. And the question is simply, would what you're building be missed, like genuinely missed, if it disappeared? Not by you, but by someone it reaches. So by way of example, if my channel True North disappeared and stopped tomorrow, if the channel itself went dark and the content all disappeared, would anyone truly notice? I'd love to get your answer to that. Do let me know in the comments. Beyond that, would anyone actually feel the absence of it? When I started building this after my redundancy back in February 2024, I was thinking about income, the income streams, the client rates, the runway that I needed to build and make sure that that was stable, that all of that matters and still does to some extent. But somewhere around month 7 or month 8, somewhere in the mid-climb, which was episode 7, and that was what that was about, I noticed something had shifted. I stopped primarily thinking about what True North would earn, and I started to think about what it would actually change. Specifically, what it would change for the person that discovered episode 1 the night or the day after they had their redundancy call. or the person who is 50-something and ashamed and sitting in the dark, wondering what would happen next. That person, that specific moment. And that's why I started to build out the 51st chapter. That's where the kernel of the idea of the 51st chapter came from. And here's what I want you to take from this. The clearer you are about who you're serving and that specific moment, the better every decision you make about it becomes. Content decisions, income decisions, identity decisions, what to build next, what to say no to, what to say yes to, all of it becomes much easier when you know exactly what the thing is for. So, what is yours for? Not your business plan answer, the real answer. Who is it impacting? If you don't have one yet, that's absolutely fine. My challenge to you is that is your 51st chapter move this week. Find it, discover it. Everything else that you do from this point onwards will flow from it. If you've been watching this series because you've been made redundant, or you can feel it coming, or you've been perhaps kicking a change down the road a little bit too long, I want you to hear something that took me the best part of 50 years, let's just say, to understand. And I'm going to get a little bit philosophical. You're not at the end of something. I would say that you're at the beginning of the version of yourself that was always supposed to exist. The one the job description never had room for or could contain. The skills that you have are real. The relationships that you have are real. The 20 or 30 years of pattern recognition and hard-won judgment and experience, all of it is real. All of it. And it's all yours. None of it was made redundant and taken from you at the door on your way out. And also, none of it is irrelevant, I hasten to add. The 51st chapter is not a metaphor for age. It's a metaphor for the decision to keep writing, to create something new when the world assumed that you were finished, done, and all over. You may have found this series at a different point in your journey. Maybe you're building something from scratch and you want proof that all of this is actually possible. Maybe you're someone that's watching this and you're trying to do something that's a bit different and you're wondering if you can. I would say you can, 100%. And you have something I didn't have when I started out. Broadly speaking, you have time. Every skill you build in your 20s and 30s becomes wisdom, equity, and that makes you unstoppable at 50 or perhaps a bit older. But you have to start building now in your 20s or your 30s, not when it feels safer, not when you have more certainty, and certainly not when you feel the timing is better. The example that I'll give you is my voice. As you may recall, many people have often said to me, Norf, you've got a great face for radio. Meaning I think they like my voice, my flat British accent, and the fact that I pronounce all of my letters. I started building that skill when I was 17. I'm now over 3 times that age. And I feel my voice has aged like a fine wine, and not like a fine cheese. The generation or generations before have shown that your shift or your pivot can be done. Alright, it's a risk, but sometimes without risk there's no reward. You've seen the ducks, the dives, the weaves, the jumps. The path has been lit, and you've seen the cost and the payoff from the outside as well as the inside. Now it's your turn. Don't wait until you're 50 to start your 51st chapter. Start now. Start your first one right where you stand. And I would highly recommend that you get after it now. The thing I think I am most proud of in building True North is the room it creates for all generations. The 50-somethings who need permission to start again, and the 20-somethings who need proof that actually was it worth starting in the first place? That conversation between the generation that has been and the generation that is coming up is the most valuable thing I could look to facilitate. And it's the one thing I believe that no other channel in this space is trying to do. So for me, that's part of the legacy of what this True North YouTube channel stands for. Okay, right, let's get practical for the last time in this series, because the 51st chapter is not just about the ideas. It's been very much about how you actually apply what we're going through. In the resources linked below, you'll find the 51st chapter rebuild workbook, 10 steps, both phases, all the frameworks. Do feel free to download it and use it. But here in this final episode, I want to give you something different. Not the practical steps of the rebuild, the forward design of what you're building towards. And I call it the 51st chapter blueprint, and it's 5 fairly straightforward questions. 5 honest answers are required. The design for the next chapter of whatever you're building. Whether you're at the beginning of it, you're in the middle, or whether you've hit that euphoric high right at the end. It's also completely okay to start this in one place and refine it. And that's the point of the journey. You start in one place and you end up at another. So here's the 51st chapter blueprint, 5 questions for your next chapter. And let me read them out. Again, I'm using my voice. Question 1. What are your 3 words? The identity foundation from episode 6. Mine are storyteller, builder, and connector. Whatever yours are, write them down at the top of your plan. You may choose to write them out and put them on your wall or put them on the fridge, whatever you choose to do. Also, answer this. Is everything that you're building an expression of those 3 words? If anything isn't, cut it or redirect it. These 3 words are the filter for every decision in your next chapter. Question 2 is, who's it for and what specific moment does it serve? Not a target demographic, a specific person for a specific moment. The 51st chapter series 1 was for the person who's just got that call and is sitting in the dark wondering what comes next. The more precisely you can describe that person and the moment, the more powerfully everything that you build will speak to them. Question 3. What does the sustainable version look like? Not the launch version, the version that's still running 5 years from now, because it's going to be built on something that's concrete and something real. What income streams are operating? What does the working week look like? What have you stopped doing because it doesn't serve the thing that you're building? The sustainable version is almost always simpler and more focused than the ambitious launch plan. Design it now, but remember it doesn't need to be perfect. You have permission to tweak, to tune, to refine and try again. Iterate and go again. Question 4. What would make it worth the difficulty? Not the income, not the milestone, the comment, the message, the moment when someone tells you that what you've built has changed something foundational for them. What is the specific version of that outcome that would make every hard week in the mid-climb feel worth it? Write it down and specifically return to it on the difficult days. This is the answer to the legacy question made personal. And finally, question 5. What do the next 90 days actually look like? Not the 5-year vision, the next 90 days. 3 specific things that will move the most important parts of the build forward. Specific enough to measure, but small enough to start today. Written down somewhere that you'll actually look, like behind your computer, or on the fridge, or somewhere that's in real plain sight. The blueprint without the 90-day commitment is just a vision board. I started this series with a Teams call I didn't ask for. However, I'm continuing past this last video in the series with something that I have specifically and intentionally chosen to build. I don't know specifically where you are in your story, whether you found this series the day after your redundancy call, or 6 months in, or years before it happened. Whether you're 28 or 61, or somewhere in between. I do know this, however. The thing that you're carrying right now, the deferred dream, the unwritten chapter, the version of yourself that keeps getting pushed to second place behind the urgent and the safe and the sensible, it matters. It truly does matter. It's worth the difficulty, and it won't build itself. The thing is, it needs you. The 51st chapter, I believe, isn't a series. I believe it's a room where the generation that has been and the generation that's coming up can sit together and tell each other the truth about what building something actually takes. Moreover, to learn from each other. I built this room because I needed it, and I didn't find it anywhere else. If you've been sitting with me for these last 8 episodes, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here on every single one. And that's no small thing. Thank you so much for your time investment, for your comments, and for your insights. My challenge to you is to be part of the 51st Chapter community. Use this room to help others, to build theirs, and to invite others back to share in this room. If this series has brought insights and has helped you in any way, be it the frameworks, a line that stood out, please do share it. Also, do let me know in the comments in which specific episode and which things stood out for you. I would genuinely love to know. Maybe send episode 1 to someone who needs to see it, and I'm sure you may know someone who just got the call or maybe can feel it coming. Do let me know what your biggest takeaway was from this series. I would love to understand your perspective. Was it the practical companions to the series? Was it the bonus episodes? Was it the workbooks? Was it all the standalone tools which are linked in the description? Do let me know in the comments. The 51st chapter isn't over. Series 2 is coming, as is the 51st chapter podcast Gone Solo. And it's going to go somewhere where this series couldn't, because this series had to exist first. There's also much more for me to build, so if you've got value from the series, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. It's true, my name is Norf, and this is just the beginning. Thank you again so much for watching the 51st Chapter Series 1, and I'll see you next time.